Will you be obeying lockdown rules after December the 2nd? Straight question. 0344 499 1000. I should say at the outset, legally obliged, I think would be reasonable to say, that of course you would be breaking the law if you didn't adhere to any rules that are set down. But it could carry on after December the 2nd. Matt Hancock has admitted, saying it was too early to know whether the current restrictions have been effective, even if the nationwide measures end on the scheduled date. A senior health chief warned that a strengthened tier system would be needed to replace it because the lowest tier had very little effect. It raises the prospect of the traditional family Christmas being, well, effectively cancelled. People, of course, will be worried about things like hospital admissions, and we know that the average number of deaths has continued to climb. On Monday night, Tory MPs demanded a clear route out of lockdown during a virtual meeting with the Prime Minister. And Mr Johnson has been warned that he will face a revolt from dozens of backbenchers if he tries to extend it. By the way, what's that group called, Charlotte? The COVID recovery group. This is a group of Conservative MPs who are not taking this lightly, the lockdown lightly. They're very, very angry about lockdown. They think it's perhaps a sledgehammer and nut situation. They think there's a different way of doing things. You can't talk to these characters. Honestly, you try to get one of them on. They've apparently got a press office of some sort that nobody seems to work in. You might imagine that they would be a little more savvy and mobilised in their attempts to impart their message, because I'm all ears at this end. I want to hear what they've got to say. We spoke to Sir Desmond Swain last week, who's part of that group, but that was just luck we got him on. We just gave him a bell and said, "Hey Des, you fancy coming on?" And he went, "Yeah, cool, it's talkRADIO." Of course I do. So he came on. Nonetheless, they are saying, according to reports, to Mr Johnson, that there could be a revolt if things don't change come December the 2nd. Look, I don't think the government can get away with this any longer. I don't think they've got a hope in hell of the United Kingdom adhering to a continuation of lockdown rules. Maybe they know this. I'm not sure. What I'm absolutely sure about is that the devastation to lives, to health, to business, to the structure of our society, to the mental health of individuals and children, issues of domestic violence, mental health associated with lockdown, is far greater than the virus itself. It has to be, right? I know lots of people have been saying that for a long time, and we've reflected that view for a long time. But there comes a point when you have to say, hang on, this is now sort of irredeemable fact territory, right? There's no doubt about this. Or do you accept a compromise? Could we open up everything and just stop some things, like families mixing and things like that? But that would still be brutal. Brutal to people who are on their own. I mean, we often talk about care homes. That's just a small part of the overall picture. There's lots of elderly people who are on their own and are isolating. And they're perhaps even scared or vulnerable and bothered because they can't see anybody. They can't see their family. So they're not in a position where they need constant care. They can look after themselves, goodness sake. It's not an illness in itself, getting old, but they're isolated. I mean, the damage in that respect. Imagine sort of getting to the end of your life and discovering that you're going to spend the last year locked up, but you're in your own home. I mean, you can still watch The Crown and have a cup of tea. You're not quite the same thing, really, is it? And being able to cuddle your grandchildren or your own children, your mum, your dad, nans, granddad. Man, the list goes on. Do you accept a compromise? Could we open everything and just stop families from mixing? I think that would be brutal. We're told that most infections happen, however, through the familial route, not pubs or schools. Two people I've spoken to in the last few days on this one. One's a hairdresser whose business is gone, basically. He's not going to reopen. He's got no rent holiday on his property. His client base dwindled after lockdown 1, never really returned. And the bills have mounted up, and he's had to borrow and beg and do his very best just to keep going. And of course, that's not just to keep his business going, that's to feed him and his family. and he's absolutely stuffed. And that's just a bloke that cuts hair for a living. Just one of many. Wouldn't be seen, would it, in the grander scale as an urgent area. He's not a key worker in that respect. And I was talking to a cab driver a couple of days ago as well, who was saying it's just gone. You know, his earnings they are a fifth this year of what they would be. So when you get into that territory, you start to realise these are not temporary problems for some people. It's not as if come January or whenever we come out of this horrendous lockdown, suddenly everything's going to be tickety-boo. Oh, don't worry, I'm back to normal now. Oh, I had a bit of a time off, but other than that, I'm back to... No, people are amassing huge debt. People are losing customers. People are changing what they do. The whole thing is devastating. So there's just two areas that one person, has spoken to in the last 3 or 4 days. One cab driver, one hairdresser, both stuffed, essentially. And the cab driver said to me, he said, if this is still going on by the end of January, he said, I'm out of this. He said, I can't do it. I will not be able to do it. I'll be a delivery driver. I'll be screaming, howling at the moon, whatever. I won't be able to do it. So just two very obvious examples in one just tiny dimension of one person's life, mine, talking to those people. Fair to say, there are hundreds of thousands of scenarios just like that. And they're people that have currently got a job, of course, so they already have the gig. What about the people who've already lost there? My sister got made redundant a couple of weeks ago. She was kind of half expecting it, but it wouldn't have happened had it not been for this. And she's now got to find herself into another position, if she can. Thousands and thousands just like her. It's the isolation thing, the mental health thing that I think is huge. I mean, we know about people not getting the same treatment in hospitals and cancer patients and queues lining up and what was that, cervical and breast screenings simply not happening, 1 million women on waiting lists for appointments or scans that can't quite happen or certainly can't happen at the right originally planned time. So there's that. There's the mental health on the elderly. There's the mental health on kids who can't see their friends. You know, at my little boy's school, he did all right, our lad, really, during that lockdown. Our neighbours have got similar age kids, so they were sort of able to play even across the garden. You know, could see each other. And he went back to school as well in June. But for some of those kids who didn't go back at that point and waited till after the summer holidays because they couldn't go back, you know, a couple of friends of ours, their kids have struggled. They've struggled. It's like a complete reboot, and they've struggled to get back in that. So this is me talking for 7 minutes, and I've just outlined to you the destruction of our country in 7 minutes, an unarguable case about the destruction of our country. Nobody could say, oh, that's just your opinion. No, I've just stated fact about what is going on in the UK right now. And we're all looking at that magic date, December the 2nd, because that's supposedly when it ends. Matt Hancock saying yesterday, well, it might not, and there might be a tier system, but that tier system could be more brutal in some areas. So even in those areas, if he said, oh, don't worry, most of the country's going to open up, but the southeast and the northwest, they won't open up. That's also millions and millions of people, right? 0344 499 1000. I just don't know how much longer you can allow the scales to tip so far with evidence-based stories and responses about how the lockdown itself is more damaging than the virus. There's got to be a point when even the most stupid person in the world could see that and say, do you know what? Yes, that's just a fact. That's now a fact. Yes, we have people in hospital, and it's not clever if you're on a ventilator, and if you lose your life and COVID was the thing that tipped you over the edge. Nobody is not sympathising with that. You know, we know that. We also know that each day more people do die of other things like cancer and heart disease and other respiratory heart-based issues. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But the other side of it, I know I'm going over old ground here, but it's only as we approach that December the 2nd date, I'm thinking, this is going to really test both us and government policy. Are you going to be obeying lockdown rules after December the 2nd? And what's your story around all of this? Where are you at on this? I'm bound to throw that out there. I said to you back in, March, that whenever we talk about this, which is going to be often, I'm not sure even then we thought we'd still be where we're at now, back then. But I made the point that absolutely we'll always, in addition to any specifics we're talking about here on Talk Radio, we'll keep the lines open. We'll just test that vibe out there. And you know, there's a sounding board going on here 24/7. So, because there are so many tangents around this, aren't there? Just when you think you've heard it all, you hear another one. There was a story today of a woman whose mother is being ejected from a care home because she broke the visitation rules by going up to the window, not into and saying hello to her mum. Now, I'm like all of these stories, I'm sure there's a bit more to it, and she might have been a royal pain in the backside. I don't know. But she was visiting her old mum through a window. You know, hello, mum, it's me. You know, that. Not going in, not trying to kidnap her, none of that. Chuck the old girl out, got rid of her. Troubled client, I think the care home said. 0344 499 1000. Will you be obeying lockdown rules come December the 2nd, if they continue?